So it was a summer day, and I was enjoying the sun and the beach on the Jersey Shore. I was sitting, on a bench on the boardwalk, and a young man came up to me and said, "Sir, could I ask you a question?" I said, "Well, sure, sit on down." So he sat down and he said, "You know, something happened to me and nobody seems to believe it. I mean, my mom doesn't believe it. My dad doesn't believe it. Even my grandmother doesn't believe what happened to me, and certainly not my little brother, Derek. Would you believe me?" Well, what was I going to say? I said, I don't know. I guess I can't answer that question until you tell me what it was. He said, "Well, okay, here's the story. Every summer, my dad and my mom and little Derek and I, we go and visit my grandmother and grandfather down on the shore like this. I mean, it's a beautiful place. Their house is just like 30 or 40 feet from the ocean. And Dad has to work during the week. We stay down there all summer, really. But on the weekends, Dad comes and the first thing that he says is, "Let's go clamming." Well, I don't like to go clamming because after we go clamming, we cook the clams and we're supposed to eat them. And I hate clams. So I usually have, mac and cheese and they eat the clams. Well, one particular day, we were out and Derek and Mom and I and Dad was there. And so we began looking for clams out in the ocean. Now, here's the story. You see, when we go out there, the water, we get down maybe until it's up to our knees. And then we use our feet to kind of walk around in the sand to see if we can find clams. And if it's a little clam, it's like a little neck clam. If it's a bigger clam, it's a coho. And so that's how we find them. And then once we feel them with our feet, we, reach down and start digging them, or sometimes we use a shovel and dig out the clam and put them in the buckets. Well, here we are out there, and Derek says, "Oh, I found a really big clam." And I looked at Derek. "It's a rock." No, it's a clam." "Derek, it's always a rock. You never find clams." "No, this is a really big clam." And Mom said to me, "Go over and help your little brother." And so I did. And I started with my foot down where Derek had his foot. And it was much too big to be a clam. It was a rock. I said, "Derek, it's a rock." No, it's a clam." I said, "Here, I'll show you." So I reached down and started to dig out this rock. And it was a clam. It was a really big clam. And so I finally pulled it out of the sand, brought it up out of the sea, and it was as big as a catcher's mitt. It was huge, and it had two little purple kind of eyes. And I said to Derek, "This is too big. This is the king of the clams, and it's far too big to eat." "No," he said, "I want it." I said, "Derek, what are you going to do? It's going to be my clam." My mother said to me, "Let him have the clam." And so we took the clam, went to the shore, put it in the bucket, and we went out and continued digging for clams. Well, it was getting pretty hot out there, so finally we left, took the bucket, took it up and put the bucket with the big clam by itself on the steps leading up to the kitchen. And then we went inside and we had lunch. After lunch, we decided that we were going to go back out, and Derek and I, and we were going to go back into the water, maybe swim or something. And we opened the kitchen door and walked down the steps, and the clam as big as a catcher's mitt, was off of the steps, and it was maybe 2 or 3 feet away, heading back towards the ocean. I said, "Where the clam is moving?" Derek said, "Mom, he's trying to trick me." And my mom came outside and said, "What's going on?" And I said, "Look, the clam is trying to get away. He's gotten out of the bucket." My mother looked at me and he said, "Put the clam back in the bucket and quit teasing your little brother." "Fine," I said. And so we went out and went swimming and came back, and the clam was out of the bucket again, and it was almost halfway to the water. I said, "Look, the clam it's coming towards the water." "Mom," Derek said, "no." And he looked at me, "You're trying to trick me again." I said, "No, I'm not. I'm not touching this clam." My mom said, "Put the clam back in the bucket again." And so finally we did. Well, then Derek said, "This is going to be my clam, and I want to keep it." I said, "That is the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. Nobody has a pet clam. That's going to be my clam." Oh, Derek said to me, "Fine." And so we put some seawater in the bucket. And then Derek said, "I'm going to put the clam right next to my bed tonight." "That's really dumb, Derek." "Absolutely. That's what I'm going to do." And he did. Well, so we went to bed, and I'm muttering to myself, "Well, what am I going to do?" And so I fell fast asleep. All of a sudden, I woke up with the sound of the ocean. That didn't sound right. And so I lifted up out of bed, and the clam, as big as a catcher's mitt, was up on the windowsill, looking out at the ocean and hissing. Oh my goodness. Well, I woke up Derek. Derek looked at me. "What's the matter? What's the matter?" I said, "Your clam is trying to get out, and we need to take it back to the ocean." And Derek really got upset. "Mom!" Well, it was midnight, and my mom came running into the bedroom. She had her nightgown on, and she said, "What's going on, Mom? He's trying to trick me again. Look, he's put the clam up on the windowsill." My mother said, "Put the clam back in the bucket and go to bed." Mom, I did not. Never mind. Go to bed." Well, we did. The next morning we got up, clam was still down there in the bucket. And we had breakfast, and Grandma said, "What's going on?" I said, "Oh, Derek, it's got this big clam. It's a clam. It's bigger than a catcher's mitt, and we have no business keeping it here. We should not send it back into the ocean where it belongs." And my grandma says, "Well, I think it's rather cute, don't you?" "Oh, what am I going to do?" "Fine." And so that day we went back out to the ocean. And when we came back, I went into the garage, and Granddad had some screens, some window screens. And I pulled one out, and I said, "At least I'm going to put the screen over the bucket so that clam doesn't get out. Derek said, yeah, right. You're going to put it, the cat. Yeah, the clam is not getting out. You're moving the clam. I said, no, Derek, I am not. Yeah, right. Yeah, that's fine. I know what you're doing. Well, that night we went to sleep again. And there was a skittering noise. And sure enough, I got up and I looked, and the screen was moving, and the clam was trying to bite a hole in the screen. I said, I don't believe this. And I called, Mom, come in here. What's going on? Derek said, what are you doing with my clam? I said, nothing. And my mother, I said, Mom, look at this. This proves it. The clam is trying to bite a hole in the screen. She said, that hole was there all the time. Oh, Mom, I can't believe this. Fine. And so we went to sleep again. Well, the next day, I was not going to do anything more about the clam, except I got 2 screens. And then I put a rock on top of the screens. Well, that night, we went to sleep again. And of course, Derek is lifting up the screen saying, oh, look at my clam, my pet clam. Oh, it's so cool. I said, the clam belongs in the ocean. Well, he wouldn't listen to me. And that night, it was maybe 1 a.m. And the noise, it woke me right up, and the noise was incredible. And I looked at the bucket, and the bucket was empty, and the screens were on the floor. And there was this noise. It was a skittering noise, and it was a whooshing noise. And I looked up, and there was the clam, bigger than a catcher's mitt, right up on the windowsill again. And it was opening up and closing and hissing. And I heard a sound from outside. Give us our king. Release the king, our king of the clams. Well, I got up, and the king of the clams on the windowsill was saying, save me, save me. I jumped out of bed. I ran over to the window. I grabbed the king of the clams. I held him tight so that he wouldn't open his mouth. And I looked out at the window, and there were clams all over the ground. And there were clams climbing up our wall outside. And as I got closer to the window, I could hear them. Give us our king. Give us the king of the clams. And I held on to the clam, and I ran out of my bedroom and out past the kitchen and out of the kitchen door and down the steps. And I started to run towards the water, holding on to the clam as quickly and as hard as I could. And the other little clams, they started following me and nipping at my feet and my ankles as I ran. And as I got to the edge of the ocean shore, I took the clam and I threw it as far out into the water as I could. And all of the other clams followed into the water until they disappeared, and everything became very quiet. I went back to bed, and the next morning, Derek got up, looked down at the bucket, and said, Mom, he's stolen my clam. My mother had a terribly angry expression on her face as she came into the bedroom. She looked at me and she said, "What did you do?" And I said, "Mom, all of the clams had come out of the ocean trying to get this big clam. And they said, 'It's our king. It's the king of the clams.' And I grabbed that clam and I ran as fast as I could out to the ocean. And all of these little clams followed me. And I threw the clam into the ocean. That's where it belongs." My mother looked at me and she said, "I've had just about enough out of this. And right now, you're going to get timed out tonight. No clamming today, tonight. No clams for dinner." I said, "Okay, that's fine. I understand." But nobody believed me. And then he looked back at me and he said, "Now, do you believe what I'm telling you?" Well, I shook my head. I said, I don't know. I mean, it seems really far-fetched. Well, he said, "Even if you don't believe me, if you go out to the shore and go clamming and you find a clam that's bigger than a catcher's mitt, the